Laughter echoed through the room, cutting through the tense silence like a knife. It was her parents. Her mother tried to stifle it, her hand pressed to her mouth, but the amusement was unmistakable. Her father, shaking his head, let out a derisive chuckle that held more pity than humor. $10, he muttered, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. The weight of their laughter crashed down on her, and she sat frozen, her body rigid as she clutched the crumpled piece of paper in her hand. Her face burned with shame, her palms clammy with the sudden rush of heat. The room around her seemed to close in, the smirks of her relatives so palpable they felt suffocating. This was it. This was her inheritance. 10 measly dollars. It was all that was left for her. And they found it amusing, as though she were nothing more than a joke. She had always felt out of place in her family, the one who never fit in with their polished world of wealth and expectations. But this was something else entirely. Her father's sneer, her mother's forced chuckles, the bitter sting of their mockery. It was as if they were telling her, once and for all, that she was unworthy of anything more. But then, as the laughter grew louder, Mr. Charles, the family lawyer, cleared his throat, cutting through the noise like a sudden chill. He paused for a moment, glancing down at the papers before him. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Actually, he said, his voice calm and steady, there is one more thing. A private letter addressed only to Jennifer. The words hung in the air like a secret waiting to be revealed. Jennifer Miller had always felt out of place in her own family. Born in Portland, Oregon in 1978, she was the youngest of two children in the wealthy Miller family. Her father, James, was a successful real estate mogul, a man who measured success by profits and the size of his portfolio. Her mother, Catherine, was a prominent social figure, dedicated to maintaining the family's reputation and ensuring that their every move aligned with the expectations of their high society peers. Success in their eyes was a matter of appearances, power, and wealth. Jennifer, however, was nothing like them. While her father spent his days attending board meetings and negotiating high-stakes deals, and her brother Mark excelled at everything expected of him, Jennifer found herself in a world that seemed foreign and stifling. As a child, she was always drawn to art, preferring to sketch the world around her rather than engage in the family's business activities. While Mark was groomed to take over the family empire, Jennifer spent her time alone, immersed in her sketchbook. At family dinners where the conversation inevitably turned to business, she sat quietly in the corner, drawing scenes that seemed far removed from the world her family inhabited. Her father often dismissed her interests as frivolous distractions, while her mother, though somewhat more supportive, urged her to focus on things that would be more practical and in line with the family's future plans. The more Jennifer tried to escape their expectations, the more she felt alienated. Her desire to pursue art seemed like a rebellion against everything her parents valued. The family, built on a foundation of business and tradition, had no room for someone like her, someone who saw the world through a different lens. As Jennifer grew older, the gap between her and her family widened. By the time she turned 18, her decision to pursue a career in art became the final straw. She had spent years quietly resisting the family's expectations, but now she had made it clear. She wanted to be an artist. She applied to a prestigious art school in New York City, a move that shocked her parents to the core. They were not accustomed to such defiance. Her father, a man who valued financial success above all else, could not understand why his daughter would choose a path that seemed so impractical. His words were sharp and dismissive, as if her dream were an insult to everything he had worked for. Her mother, on the other hand, was less vocal but no less critical. She urged Jennifer to think about her future, about stability, about choosing something that would ensure a comfortable life. The idea of becoming an artist was, to them, a waste, a foolish fantasy that would lead to nothing but struggle. But Jennifer didn't waver. She moved to New York, immersing herself in a world that finally felt like it was meant for her. In the city's vibrant art scene, she found herself surrounded by people who saw the world through the same creative lens. Still, despite the excitement and fulfillment she found in her studies, a nagging feeling of isolation followed her. Her parents never fully understood, and their rare visits to the city only served to reinforce that divide. When she graduated and returned home, diploma in hand, she had hoped that her parents might at least acknowledge her accomplishments. Instead, their indifference was palpable. Her father barely looked at her artwork, his focus fixed solely on whether she had found any real work. Her mother remained polite but distant, her encouragement still rooted in practicality, never in passion. Jennifer realized then that no matter what she did, she would never be able to meet their expectations. She had made her choice, but it came at the cost of being truly seen by the family she once tried so hard to belong to. After a particularly difficult family dinner, Jennifer found herself yearning for solitude. The endless, disapproving glances, the critical remarks from her parents, and the weight of expectations were more than she could bear. She needed an escape, a place where her art could breathe without judgment. Without a second thought, she decided to visit her Uncle John, a quiet, unconventional artist whose work was known only to a small circle of avant-garde enthusiasts. John had always been a source of encouragement for Jennifer, offering her the kind of support that her parents never did. He had never asked her to conform, never told her that art was a futile pursuit. Instead, he recognized her talent and nurtured it in ways that no one else had. His studio was a small, somewhat cluttered space on the edge of town, filled with unfinished sculptures, canvases stacked against the walls, and the faint scent of oil paint in the air. It was a far cry from the polished, sterile environments Jennifer was used to in her family's world. There she felt free. When she showed John her latest work, a series of abstract paintings that captured fleeting moments of human emotion, he didn't offer the usual polite compliments. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully, as if seeing her for the first time. He understood. "You see the world differently," he told her, his voice calm but full of conviction. "You have something rare, don't let them make you believe otherwise." With a quiet smile, he reached for a dusty box on a shelf and handed Jennifer an old camera. It had belonged to his father, a piece of history that had sat forgotten for years. "This camera is for you," he said, placing it gently in her hands. "It's yours now. Go create something that's truly yours, something that doesn't fit into anyone's mold." The camera felt heavy in her hands, but in that moment, Jennifer understood. She wasn't just receiving a gift. She was being entrusted with a new way of seeing the world. The spark of inspiration that had been smoldering within her for years suddenly flared to life. She would no longer paint or photograph the things she thought others wanted to see. Instead, she would capture the forgotten, the ignored, the things that lived on the fringes of society. And so she began her new project, a series of portraits of people living on the outskirts of the city in places that most people would rather pretend didn't exist. It was raw, it was real, and it was her. Jennifer's project, Forgotten Places, began to gain recognition far beyond the circles she had expected. The raw portraits she captured of marginalized people in abandoned spaces began to stir something in her, something that others had long overlooked. Invitations to showcase her work started arriving, including an offer for a prestigious exhibition in a local gallery. For the first time, it felt as though her art was speaking to the world, unfiltered and true to her vision. Yet when her parents learned of this success, their reaction was not one of support. Instead, they saw it as a potential opportunity to pull her back into their world, one where art was only valuable if it fit neatly into the boundaries of what they deemed acceptable. They offered her financial backing, but with one condition: she had to alter her work, make it more palatable, more in line with their idea of success. The offer was tempting, but Jennifer knew that taking it would be a betrayal of everything she had fought for. She had spent too many years trying to live up to their expectations, only to realize that no matter what she did, it was never enough. She refused their offer, unwilling to compromise her authenticity. She understood now that her art was her only true expression, and it couldn't be shaped by the constraints of the world her parents lived in. Not long after, Jennifer's life took an unexpected turn. Her grandfather, Charles Miller, a man of few words and even fewer displays of affection, passed away. Despite their strained relationship, Jennifer had always felt that her grandfather understood her in a way her parents never did. He was quiet, reserved, but there was something about his gaze that made her feel seen. When his death was announced, she had no expectations of anything beyond the typical inheritance her family would receive. However, at the reading of his will, her world was turned upside down. As the lawyer read the contents of the will, Jennifer's anticipation quickly turned into disbelief. She had expected little, but the revelation that followed shattered everything she had assumed about her place in the family. The quiet man who had always stood on the sidelines had left her something far more significant than money. At the reading of the will, Jennifer sat motionless as the lawyer announced that she had been left a mere $10. The words felt like a slap in the face, and for a moment, everything around her seemed to blur. Her world, already strained by years of conflict with her family, now felt completely shattered. The laughter from her parents and relatives was almost deafening, their mockery echoing through the room. Her father's snide comments blended with her mother's uncomfortable chuckles, and Jennifer felt the sting of humiliation deep within. She had always known that her family never understood her, but this was something else entirely, a final, cruel statement of dismissal. But just as she began to process the weight of the situation, the lawyer's voice cut through the noise. "Actually, there is one more thing," he said, pausing for effect. "A private letter addressed only to Jennifer." The room fell silent, the laughter halting abruptly as everyone's attention shifted. Jennifer's heart pounded in her chest. As the lawyer handed her the envelope, she immediately recognized the familiar handwriting. It was her grandfather's. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter, almost afraid of what it might reveal. The words inside were unexpected, but they brought a rush of relief and disbelief. The letter explained that her grandfather had chosen her as the sole heir to the family's legacy, but under one condition. She had to remain true to her path in art. Her grandfather had seen something in her that no one else had. He understood that her creative vision was her inheritance, not the family business or its wealth. He had left her control of a foundation and gallery, places where she could nurture her art and continue to grow her career. Along with this, he had passed down a collection of rare works, pieces that had once been dismissed by the family as unimportant, but that he believed were priceless. This inheritance was not just about money, it was about freedom, a chance for Jennifer to finally claim her place in the world on her own terms. Jennifer returned to Portland, her heart filled with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. She had opened her own gallery, a space that was hers and hers alone, a place where her art could breathe freely, away from the judgments of her family. The opening was quiet, almost understated. Just a small group of local critics and a few close friends. There were no grand speeches, no lavish displays. This wasn't the kind of event that would make headlines or attract crowds of wealthy socialites. It was hers, a quiet celebration of her vision. As the evening unfolded, Jennifer moved through the crowd, taking in the comments and whispers. But her attention was caught when she spotted her parents standing near the entrance. Her father, the man who had always dismissed her dreams, stood in the corner, staring at the work displayed around the room. He seemed out of place, unsure of where to direct his gaze. It was the first time Jennifer had seen him there, at something she had created, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. Her father stepped closer to her, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. "Did you do all of this?" he asked, his tone barely concealing his shock. Jennifer simply nodded, and in that moment, a wave of realization washed over her. She didn't need to say anything. Her father's question, his disbelief, was the victory she had longed for. She had followed her own path, despite the criticism and opposition, and now her work spoke for itself. It wasn't about wealth, about approval, or even recognition. Jennifer understood that her true inheritance was not money, but the courage to be herself. As she stood there, surrounded by the art she had created, Jennifer felt a deep sense of peace. Her journey had been long and difficult, but now she had created a world where she could define success on her own terms. The critics, the journalists, and the handful of family members who had come, none of it mattered. What mattered was that she had arrived at a place where her art was her legacy, and she no longer needed anyone's validation. She had built something lasting, something real, and in that quiet moment, Jennifer knew she had won.